With Buymageddon happening this NFL week, there were not as many games, so as an NFL fan watching, you were hoping you were going to get some really good, close ones, and guess what, guys? It didn't really happen this time, as one game was one score this week. But you know what's the fun part of it? It's a long NFL season, and your host, Sam Gold, right here, is going to recap every detail you missed from Week 8 of the 2025 NFL season. It's still a fun one, a lot to talk about, so let's roll the intro.
KC Karate Kid with the arrow and chop. Nobody can touch us when it's lonely at the top.
All right, let's start with Thursday Night Football, which aesthetically looked great. One of the uniform matchups of the week as the Chargers go back to their Navy uniforms for the first time. And I don't mean the shitty Navy uniforms that they tried to wear since the 2020 rebrand. I mean the real old school 90s, early 2000s Navy. So I love that. But for the game itself, a snooze fest, and unfortunately, going to be a mantra of pretty much every game to come in this recap. But that's okay because there's always something interesting. That's why football is the best sport. Okay, so with this game, starting with the score, 37-10, the Chargers win this one. Much needed, dominant victory. But I'm going to start with the Vikings because not only was Carson Wentz genuinely one of the worst quarterbacks I've watched all season, at least with this specific performance. Listen, it's one thing if you're a bad quarterback, like Jameis Winston, for example, and you're taking shot after shot, and yes, maybe it results in 3 interceptions, but at least you're going out there trying. With Carson Wentz, a guy who all he does is hold on to the ball, steps forward into the pocket, and takes a sack every other play, I don't want to watch it anymore. And that wasn't even the reason why I wanted him taken out of this game. It seemed like, especially in the second half, every single time he was going to the sideline, or even every single time he was done throwing a ball, he was holding his shoulder in agony. And you had other guys. You had JJ McCarthy back there. You had Max Brosmer. And they just refused to take him out until it was way too late. And honestly, the Vikings coaching staff should be ashamed of themselves. I get it. JJ McCarthy right now is not looking like a starting caliber quarterback. But you're torturing this man in Carson Wentz. And I know Kirk Herbstreit was all over him, trying to be tough and saying you can't show your emotions like that. But the dude clearly is on the verge of tearing something in his shoulder. And you keep forcing him to throw the ball. In a game you're getting blown out, it doesn't seem like the Vikings are really into winning football right now. They have a huge issue at quarterback. Flip side on the Chargers, a little more positive. I just want to mention a guy who is randomly broken out in his rookie season. Now of the last 3 weeks, Oronde Gadsden, the tight end for the Chargers. He's averaged over 100 yards per game in the last 3 games, and he scored a touchdown in each of his last 2 games. The Chargers this season have had an array of weapons, but the guys who are least expecting are the ones that are now overperforming. At first, it was Quentin Johnson, who, funny enough, actually had 0 catches in this game, so it was kind of a dud. But now it's Gadsden. Keenan Allen came back, which you weren't expecting until right before the season started. And then there's Ladd McConkey, who's had a nice season, but you thought he was really going to be the number 1 guy. And now they have all these little bits and pieces coming together. And if they can have all of them play great at once, they can put up more performances like this. So this was huge for the Chargers. As we move on to the Sunday 1 o'clock games, let's start with Dolphins-Falcons. Pretty random matchup. 34-10. The Dolphins win it, which now proves once again, I've been saying this all season, the Falcons have to be the most confusing and honestly the most untrustworthy team in the NFL. Because they have beaten the Vikings back when they were better. They've beaten the Commanders and they've beaten the Bills. And now they've been shut out 30-0 to the Panthers and have gotten destroyed at home against the Dolphins in a must-win scenario. I know Kirk Cousins was playing, but I thought he would bring at least a little bit of stability to be able to at least be competitive with a Dolphins team that has been one of the worst defenses in the NFL. They've been one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL. Meanwhile, Bijan Robinson had 9 rushes for 25 yards in this game, 2.8 per carry, after having one of the largest amounts of total yards by any player, and that was with having a bye week already. An extremely confusing performance for the Falcons. Honestly, almost as much as a confusion for the Dolphins, because Tua was on the verge of probably never playing it down for this team again. He comes out and throws 4 touchdown passes. And now I feel like the Dolphins probably should be tanking, but now they won a game where it's like great and all that they played well, but it doesn't really matter. So overall, one of the most confusing games of the weekend. I don't know what happened. The Falcons are falling apart. The Dolphins look different all of a sudden. There you go. All right, now we head to Carolina for Bills at Panthers. The Bills destroy the Panthers 40-9 in a game where James Cook delivers once again. He's been doing it all season, and this is the first time he's had over 200 rushing yards in his career. Now, a crazy stat is that this is the third time a running back has had over 200 total yards at Bank of America Stadium. So I guess if you're a running back, maybe you should be frothing at the mouth, thinking if you have this schedule or this stadium on your schedule, because all of a sudden, running backs are going off. So Rico Dowdle first, now James Cook. The Bills were absolutely dominating this entire game, and I think at least it seems like Bryce Young is still the better option than Andy Dalton, because Andy Dalton looked like a guy who just didn't want to play anymore. It's kind of similar to Carson Wentz, where he was taking sacks left and right, and it just seemed like there was no life on that offense. So hopefully with Bryce Young coming back, the Panthers could still sustain a team that's somewhat competitive. All right, next up, the Ravens finally get back in the win column, beating the Bears at home 30-16. It's only one game, but I do feel like, myself included, maybe jumped on Harbaugh a little too soon. You could have easily gone out in this game, which was close, and had no motivation, especially with Lamar last second not starting in this one. It was Tyler Huntley instead. And instead, the defense probably played one of their best games of the season. Now, half of it is probably the Bears' fault, which we'll get to in a second, but the fact that they showed this much heart back at home after a bye with Lamar still being out, I do think that proves that Harbaugh still has this team pretty much together, and hopefully now they're going to be on a little bit of a run here. So we'll see what happens. But man, on the Bears side of the football, they lost the turnover and the penalty battle, and I just think now that they've finally broken their 4-game win streak, which is something they did last year, starting 4-2 and then losing and then going on a huge losing streak. Hopefully they don't do that this year, but it does seem like there's slow cracks in the foundation and there's red flags starting to appear, which have appeared a lot of games this season. And at this point, now that they've lost, I don't think we should ignore it. Caleb Williams has showed flashes with his arm talent, but he's not quite there yet still. I just think the main issue with the Bears right now is they don't play complementary football. And anytime their offense is playing really good, their defense can't stop anything. And anytime their defense gets turnovers or gets stops, it just feels like the offense, especially in the red zone, can't fully get there. I'm a little bit worried about their complementary football. Their offensive line is still not fully gelled. Caleb's accuracy is still an issue. It feels like he's regressed since that Cowboys game in week 3. So overall, even though the record's still not bad, and this was a tough game to go out and win in Baltimore, you still had Tyler Huntley outplaying Caleb Williams in this one. That's a bit concerning, and I do think that's something to keep an eye out for the Bears, as they are showing a lot of red flags right now. All right, and then the Texans win 26-15 over the 49ers. Coming into this game, these are the two teams that have played each other the least amount in NFL history. So you just witnessed the rarest matchup in NFL history. Texans hosting the Niners. That's the rarest. It's only happened 2 other times before this. And overall, the Niners have only lost the Texans once before this week. So there you go. That's a fun fact there. With this game, though, this was another one that was just kind of tough to watch. It was closer than most, but honestly, I got to give props to this Texans run defense, which, by the way, has been so dominant all season. CMC held to 8 carries for 25 rushing yards. A guy that has been breaking records, or is on path to break records, especially in the receiving game this season for a running back. And, you know, the Texans really could have lost it all in this game after a really tough loss on Monday Night Football, where it felt like their offense was struggling to get every single yard. And this is another thing, kind of like with Harbaugh, with D'Amico Ryans, it shows the coaching. It shows that this team is willing to back this guy, even if they're starting off the season 2-4. This was huge. I don't care if the 49ers were banged up. To come out, have this defensive performance, have CJ Stroud limit his turnovers, and play a really clean, solid football game, that is hope for the Texans to stay competitive. But they still need to get their offensive line together because it's still really bad. All right, moving on. I swear I'm not overreacting when I say this. This season, Drake May is a top 5 quarterback. I get it. People are like, the Patriots have had one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. And that is true. But what do people say year after year? What do good teams do? They beat up on bad teams. And that's exactly what the Patriots do, especially here at home. And they were down 7-0. They just went out and pretty much shut down the Browns for the entire game afterwards. And I gotta say, welcome to the NFL, finally. It took until week 8, but Travion Henderson it seemed like for whatever reason, Mike Vrabel hated the guy and refused to play him. He finally got 10 carries for 75 yards in this game. So anybody who owns Trayvon Henderson or had the balls to hang on to him this entire season, hey, maybe there's a bright future there. Overall, the Patriots continue to dominate. They're 6-2. And yes, Drake May, I wholeheartedly believe right now he is top 3 in the MVP conversation. And it's such a crazy jump from what you saw last year because they have similar weapons. Yes, the running game's slightly better. They do have Diggs now. But it's not like it's out of this world with the people he gets to choose from in his arsenal. So the fact that he's improved this much in this short amount of time with a pretty weak roster still, he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks to come. With the Browns, however, the only thing I'll mention is Myles Garrett. Congrats to him. 5 sacks in 1 game. That is monumental no matter how bad the team is. And he was pissed at the end of the game. I know it was because they were benching him and the game was over. But, dude, I'm sorry. After signing that contract last season, which, look, good for you. Get your money. I don't feel bad anymore. And you know what you signed up for. You're on the Cleveland Browns. You've been on the Cleveland Browns for 9 seasons. I don't feel bad. And listen, you can rack up the stats all you want. You're a first ballot Hall of Famer. You played an amazing game. You're one of the best defenders I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't want it to be overshadowed, even though I'm making fun of Myles Garrett. Getting 5 sacks in 1 game is insane because if you're an NFL player that averages 5 sacks a season, let's say even for like 7 seasons, that's a really solid NFL career. So it should not be overseen what Myles Garrett has done this season and every single season, and he's on his way to maybe another 20 sack season. Some players in the NFL will die to even get 1 sack in their career. So there you go. Okay, the Eagles beat the Giants 38-20. They wore their Kelly greens, so it looked good as well. Aesthetically, fun fact, since they've moved to those uniforms coming back in 2023, they are undefeated. So maybe they should move to them permanently because that would make me hate the Eagles less because, man, after this game were people hating on the Eagles even more so. Let's get into it for only a second. I don't want to go too far into it because I have many other reasons why the Eagles obviously won this game. And obviously this is talking about the tush push once again. This time it was a play that should have been a fumble and they ruled down forward progress even though there's clearly nothing to be stopped yet as the ball was coming out. Anybody complaining about this play has nothing to do with, oh, the Giants would have won if this was reversed. No, it has nothing to do with that anymore. It's just the play itself and how hard it is to officiate. And it's gotten past the point of, oh, like, we just do it better than anybody else. Like, it's just so clear now what they're missing in these calls. And I think a lot of NFL fans are frustrated from it. So I do think that's interesting to keep an eye out on. Now, obviously, once again, I just said it. I don't think that's why the Eagles won this game by any means. There's so many other plays during the game. I mean, first of all, talking about the Giants, Cam Skatebbo and that ankle injury, one of the worst things I've seen all season. That sucks. I'm sure he's going to be out the rest of the season, but man, I wish him a speedy recovery. That was gruesome to watch. But in terms of the Eagles, listen, Hurts had another great game, 4 touchdowns, a near perfect passer rating once again. He only has 1 turnover on the entire season, so you could say he plays boring, he plays ugly. He has not been an issue at all for this Eagles team. He's still a top 10 quarterback easily. He's been great. And the Eagles did everything right. Their passing game was perfect. Their rushing game was great. Saquon finally had his first rush of over 20 yards this season. He broke away with that opening touchdown. He did pull a hammy, though, at the end, so I hope he comes back healthy after the bye. Tank Bigsby is finally involved. You have over 100 rushing yards, which I was thinking to myself, I'm like, why did they even trade for this guy if they're not going to use him? But they finally did this game. And then they won the sack battle in this one. So they played all facets of the game perfectly. That is why they won the game, no matter how injured the Giants were. And yes, I do think it's going to be a huge discussion moving forward with the tush push, which it should be. But I just want to split the difference here and mention how that's not the exact reason why the Eagles won the game. Take it from a Chiefs fan who knows how to dissect these problems whenever anybody brings up the refs. So there you go. Let's move on. All right, the Colts beat the Titans 38-14. Really quickly on the Titans, I hate talking about them, but I have to mention, but I just can't do it anymore. I physically cannot watch them play football. Every single yard is so tough, which is funny because if you look up the total team stats side by side between these two teams in this game, it's actually not that far off. But it just feels like the difference in ease between both teams getting a yard is just astronomical. And I can't watch the Titans anymore. It's disgusting. Moving on to the Colts, however, Jonathan Taylor, I have not quite seen a player play this well and have it go this under the radar. Now, I know for anybody who actually follows the NFL intensely, and for a lot of people in the media, he is getting talked about. But I must mention this, if for you, anybody who's casually watching and is watching this video, I have to update you on Jonathan Taylor halfway through the season. He has scored 3 touchdowns in a single game, 4 out of 8 games so far. If your running back scores 3 touchdowns a game 50% of the time, you might win the Super Bowl outright on something like that, mixed in with your great offensive line. I'm saying this as a Chiefs fan right now. Until the Colts play the Chiefs and the Chiefs beat them in Week 12, the Colts are the best team in the NFL. And it's kind of like the Patriots. I know they beat up on a lot of bad teams, but once again, that's what great teams do. They dominate bad teams when they need to. And this is an offense that I have not seen, that anybody has seen statistically, since the 2007 Patriots, which is called one of the best offenses in NFL history. They have scored 30-plus points in 6 of their first 8 games. The only other team to do that is the 2007 Patriots. So I don't care what anybody says. If they're worried about Daniel Jones, yes, maybe they go out and win just one playoff game, or maybe they lose in the divisional round. I don't know. But right now, it is hard for me to say they are not the best team in the NFL. All right, Bucks beat the Saints 23-3. Not much to talk about this game. Spencer Rattler, his experiment's over. He was a little bit frisky for a few weeks there, but the fact that you got benched for Tyler Shuck, yeah, it's probably over for you. And this was really a story about the Bucks defense in this one. They were so dominant. It felt like Baker was still kind of getting his legs back from the Lions loss last week, and he really didn't play that perfectly. Now, he did have 0 turnovers, which was important, but you could really tell in this one that they need Bucky back in terms of their rushing efficiency. Sean Tucker and Rashad White are just not doing it yards per carry wise. So overall, it's good that they got a dominant defensive performance, as hopefully the rest of their offense gets healthy after the Week 9 bye. All right, the Broncos beat the Cowboys 44-24. And what is my uniform matchup of the week? We knew it was going to look beautiful, and man, did it. And that's coming from a Chiefs fan who hates the Broncos. But I got to say, aesthetically, it was thrown back to the 1977 Super Bowl. And it was kind of the same type of game as that Super Bowl, except reversed, where the Broncos killed the Cowboys, not the Cowboys killing the Broncos. And yes, the immovable object in the Broncos defense beat the unstoppable force in the Cowboys offense this time. And listen, Bo Nix was getting some shit after last week's game, saying that, you know, his best footballs come in a couple of really lucky miracle comeback fourth quarter wins. And this time he put together a fully consistent, solid performance. And it was not only him, but RJ Harvey, the rookie, had a breakout game. 3 touchdowns in this one. This was Dak Prescott's worst game for the Cowboys. They had a tough loss. They really need to make a trade, even if it's for a slightly above average defensive player before this deadline. But they need to do something because this good offense cannot go to waste. All right, and before we get to the Sunday Night Football game, I saved this 1 o'clock game for the end because it was the only good close game of the entire Sunday. And who would have thought? Bengals, Jets. The Jets get off the schneid, win their first game of the season in a game that ended 39-38. Where do I start? Well, I'll say this. The last time the Jets played in Cincinnati was 2019, and the Jets handed the Bengals their first win of the season. This was mid-season as well. And fun fact, that was head coach Zach Taylor, as a rookie head coach, his first win of his career. Now, 6 years later, the Jets come back to Cincinnati, winless, get their first win against Zach Taylor, in which what I would believe to be, in my opinion, Zach Taylor's last game. Now, knowing the Bengals and a team that had Marvin Harrison as their head coach for almost 20 years after so many losing seasons, they're not going to fire the guy. But not only he should be fired, but Al Golden should be fired. And so many other people from this defensive coaching staff have to be fired after dropping an absolute bombshell of a horrific. I just can't believe this happened. I mean, I can believe this happened because the Bengals are just so disastrous in so many different ways. But watching this next to my dad gets pretty mad sometimes when the Bengals lose. But you know it's bad when it goes from mad to just, yeah, I mean, this is how we lost the game. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, that's how you know it was just so shocking that you can't even exert energy into this one. It's not like the Bengals had any real hopes this season, But you just came off of a really nice win against the Steelers on Thursday Night Football, where Joe Flacco was playing great, and he played pretty solid in this one too. Chase Brown had a breakout game finally this season, and you blow it. And you blow it to the New York Jets of all teams. And it just felt like this team defensively was so unserious the entire game. You were letting guys like Justin Fields go out there and put up some of the best plays he's ever put up in his career. I mean, that 2-point conversion in the fourth quarter was one of the best passing plays of the entire season. And then follow that up by the Breece Hall touchdown where he throws it after like kind of pump faking. And he's like, am I going to throw it? I'm just going to lob it up there. Boom, Mason Taylor open in the back of the end zone. Now they're going to take the lead. I don't get it. I don't want to watch the Bengals anymore. I don't want to talk about them anymore. At least for Jets fans, if you go 1-16 this season, you could look back and watch this game over and over again because, man, it must have been fun for you guys. But you know what? Maybe I got to blame the crazy Twitter graphic that the Bengals put up pre-game 24 hours before the game started. We'll put up a picture here, but I just don't understand how anybody in that social media team thought it wasn't going to be in poor taste with specifics to what the team and the city is, but let's move on. That was the craziest game of the weekend. As storyline-wise, this was the most interesting game, which is our last game on the slate. Sunday Night Football just happened. Steelers, Packers. I predicted the Packers to win, and for Jordan Love to outplay Aaron Rodgers, and I got it right because the Packers won 35-25, where Jordan Love, completion percentage was on point. He had 4 touchdowns, no turnovers. Now, not that Aaron Rodgers played bad because he played decent in this one. He wasn't terrible. The Packers are just so well-rounded. Now, especially offensively, where they didn't even really need to rely on Josh Jacobs in this one. And is Tucker Kraft the best tight end in the NFL? There's a conversation for it. And now with Christian Watson coming back, and even though the receivers aren't perfect, they just have so much depth that if Jordan Love can just get some time behind this offensive line, which he did in this one, they are a scary team to play against. And I think what the flip side with the Steelers is one, their defense is just not playing as well as I thought they were going to play this season. They've just struggled in many games this year. But second of all, even if Rodgers plays well, there just is not enough guys getting open. And this was so proven in this one. They need to trade for a wide receiver before the deadline from a shitty team, maybe like a Chris Olave or something. But it can't just be DK Metcalf or bust at this point because they actually had a chance in this one, but they were just not guys getting open, which led to Aaron Rodgers taking sacks in the fourth quarter. And that's a recipe for disaster there. So that's why I believe the Packers right now are in a way better spot as a team than the Steelers are overall. Last thing I'll say about this game, speaking of uniform matchups, this has got to be top 5 worst uniform matchups of my lifetime. We'll put it up here. That was disgusting. Between probably the 2 most popular, successful franchises, some of the most classic uniforms in the NFL, and this was a storyline waiting to happen all season, and this is the aesthetic you chose for it. Mind-boggling. I don't understand it. That was disgusting. So was most of this week. But look, we had a lot to talk about. There were still a lot of fun things to uncover about Week 8, the 2025 NFL season. If you're wondering to yourself, Sam, you're a Chiefs fan, why didn't you talk about Chiefs Commanders? Well, it's Monday, so we'll see what happens. I don't want to get too far ahead of my skis here because the Chiefs could pull another Jaguars game. But I do think the Chiefs are going to win that game pretty handily. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment down below your favorite moment from this week of the NFL. And follow us at First and Gold on Instagram and TikTok. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you guys next episode for the Week 9 preview. Goodbye.